Okay, we're moving on to the next part of our session now, where we have 3 EIT team members who will be joining us on the floor. And we require some more chairs here for them to do that. But we will start, first of all, while we're doing that. Márton, could I ask you to join us in the first instance, where you will have, Márton has a PowerPoint presentation for us. And what we're going to be focusing on in this session is becoming an EIT Innovation Community. So looking at the competition for EIT manufacturing and EIT urban mobility. And then we'll also move this into engaging with the EIT and an introduction to the funding model, contractual relations, the grant cycle, and monitoring. So quite a lot of intensive information in this session, but of course necessary for taking this forward. So Márton, can I ask if you want to make a start?
It's up to you. I'm happy to start. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alison. Still, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to give you a short introduction to the competition for selecting 2 innovation communities this year. As you have heard, clearly we, the EIT, and our community is currently on a path for growth. Under the Horizon 2020 Framework Program for Research and Innovation, we have an estimated a rough budget of around 2.34 billion euros that we use for, first of all, bringing our first innovation communities to take their next steps towards maturity. We help innovation communities who have joined later to scale up and boost their activities. But this is also the time for us to tackle additional societal challenges you have heard. Namely, this is also the chance for you to get involved, because according to our strategic innovation agenda, this year we are selecting 2 more innovation communities, EIT Urban Mobility and EIT Manufacturing. It's important to stress here that this is a call for selecting a winning partnership. This is not a call for direct funding immediately, but for the setup and the designation of successful partnerships who would then later may enter into a long-term agreement and partnership with the EIT. As I said, these 2 innovation communities will tackle major societal challenges, which are also set out as priorities under Horizon 2020. And I start with EIT Urban Mobility. This innovation community will develop solutions for sustainable urban mobility through breakthrough innovations leading to greener, more inclusive, safer and smarter transport systems. And this is, again, one of the major challenges to be addressed under Horizon 2020, but it also covers different aspects. Of course, transport issues, including new mobility concept, transport organizations, logistics, and transport system safety and security, environmental aspects, so reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from transport systems, other air pollutants, noise reductions, but also urban planning, so new concepts for bringing work and living together, for example, spatial planning aspects of it. And it's important, of course, that the economic and social level impacts are the same as for all innovation communities, fostering sustainable growth, job creation, and contributes to tackling this societal challenge and in the end improve the quality of life for the European citizens. EIT Manufacturing, the other innovation community to be selected with the call this year, will strengthen high-value or added-value manufacturing industries to guarantee Europe's competitive position in a global scale. In particular, under Horizon 2020, this issue was flagged for manufacturing in particular, so that's also a response to this societal challenge. This has to be done by creating value, delivering products and service innovations, establishing also excellence, achieving high brand recognition, but also to contribute to the increased competitiveness of Europe and the European manufacturing industry, create sustainable, environmental friendly manufacturing processes. Here I would like to draw your attention on the fact that these broad topics have been set out in our strategic innovation agenda. But in the afternoon, colleagues from the European Commission will also refer to current policy priorities. However, this is a long-term cooperation. When you join the EIT community, you may plan up to 15 years or even further with your strategies. So, of course, current policy priorities are relevant here, but we look beyond and we look at the broader scope here. I also would like to mention, when we speak about innovation, of course, incremental innovation is part of the story, just like disruptive innovation and innovative products as well. I would like to very briefly guide you to the main evaluation criteria for the calls for proposals. This is a bit of a dry part, but I try to make reference at least the forthcoming speakers as well and show you what it means in practical matters when you start engaging with us later on. As you know, we have published the calls already in January, the 12th of January, and currently the proposal as are already can be submitted, but it's too early, I would say, because the deadline is only July. You can see that there are three overarching topics which we addressed during the evaluation phase as well. And here I would like to draw the attention to refer to the little booklet you have all got, the registration procedure, what we call framework of guidance, which we believe carries a lot of useful practical information on all the aspects that I will be talking you through as well. As you can see through the here. Under the strategic approach, we will value, first of all, the long-term strategic approach your innovation community will take. Here is the chance also for you to define the themes within the broad scope of what you can find in the strategic innovation agenda. We believe that the proposals are best placed to show which are the topics within the broadly defined themes that should be addressed by the innovation community. Of course, we have supplied you with different annexes in the proposal package, which we urge you to use, for example, setting out your strategic objectives, your vision and mission, and submit that through the proposal stage. Now, the partnership and innovation potential is a very important aspect. I think the previous speakers have already touched upon a lot of different aspects what we are looking for here. So, of course, a balanced representation of knowledge triangle, a diversity of the partners, diversity similar to what we have now here in the room today, excellence to be there, but also going beyond the core players, also reaching out to the regional innovation schemes to countries you have seen on the map from the presentation of Márton. We have deliberately set a maximum of 50 partners per applicant consortia as a cap, but this is only in the startup stage, so in the proposal stage. The innovation communities have to develop a strategy and have to come up with also a sound system for allowing the partnership to be open, to welcome new partners, but also partners may eventually leave the partnership in the long run. We have also set a cap of 5 co-location center innovation hubs at the proposal stage. Again, it can be part of your expansion plan in the proposal to demonstrate how you would grow further after the startup years. It's of course already a high number, the 50 partners. It's difficult to imagine probably if you have experience with other research projects under Horizon 2020. It's a much bigger consortium. It's much more than the bare number of these partners. So this is where we aim for setting a strength, and the strength of the partnership should be just much more than just the sum of the individual partners. Of course, synergies are equally important, and I think this has been already touched upon, that the partnership has to have anchors in existing initiatives, maybe third partner initiatives, global European initiatives, which are relevant for the respective fields. If you have seen previous call for kick proposals, you may have noticed that we have altered the scoring, and we have deliberately reduced the points one can get on operations, and this is a choice we made in order to divert the attention on the two other aspects, namely the strategic aspects I've touched upon and the impact, which I will be introducing very shortly. Concerning the operations, it is important to highlight here, we'll get back to this later on, that after the selection is done by the end of this year, the winning consortium will be designated and may be granted a startup grant for next year. This should allow for setting up operational legal structures of the future innovation community. So there is ample time for that, there is dedicated budget for that, and this is why in the proposal phase we only ask for demonstrating the interim management team's excellence and capacity, but also to put in place strong and diverse flexible management systems to manage such a huge cooperation. You will see that in the proposal's terms of references, you find the minimum criteria for the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operational Officer. I will not go into details. My colleagues will introduce the good governance principles which have to be respected by every single innovation community. You will also hear more about the funding model of the EIT community. So I would rather emphasize the fact that EIT being an impact-driven organization and results-oriented organization, the single biggest scores you can get in the technical evaluation stage is actually on the Impact and Innovation Community scoreboard. We have a set of key performance indicators. Again, you will hear a bit more about that later on. But it's important that the set is not only ambitious, but it's also realistic, because the numbers you would present in this scoreboard have to be totally aligned with the strategy, the strategic objectives, and also the operational aspects you have presented. So it will essentially capture the full profile of your proposal. The EIT operates under a common brand identity, so that's also part of your task to design and build the dissemination of results and communications best tailor-made to your respective fields, but also in line with the EIT's brand book and communication guidelines. In a nutshell, you can get up to 100 points in the technical evaluation stage, and successful proposers who pass a 70% threshold will be invited to a hearing to the EIT's governing board, where an additional 30 points can be awarded. So 130 points in total. The best proposals for both topics can be designated by the EIT. A recap on the timeline, as I've mentioned, we have published the calls for proposals already on the 12th of January. Under the Horizon 2020 participant portal, the call package is accessible. We also have the documents on the EIT's website, including all annexes, can be downloaded. You will have to submit the proposals by the 12th of July, 5 o'clock Brussels time. There are a couple of basic checks we would carry on the admissibility. These are very similar to those which you will find in any other Horizon 2020 project concerning financial capability of the applicants, concerning the bare minimum requirements set out in the proposal. Of course, it has to be submitted by time and also via the electronic submission system. The EIT will select a panel of independent experts who will help us evaluating the proposals and help the EIT governing board to evaluate the proposals. And as I said, those proposals which pass on the 70% threshold We'll have a hearing with the EIT's governing board in December, the 4th and the 5th of December. A few days later, we'll be happy to announce the winners and be prepared to hand over a designation package to the winning partnership, and may already sign a startup grant agreement with this partnership in early January 2019. Thank you very much for your attention. I will remain at your disposal to answer further questions.
Thank you, Márton. Thank you very much, Márton. We're not letting you away. Yep, that's great. Thank you. I'd like now, please, to ask Dávid, could you join us? We've had an excellent global perspective, I think, from Márton. And now Dávid, who is head of section grant assurance, is going to take us through some more of the detail connected to that. Thank you, Dávid. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alison. Well, in the next 10 minutes, I will try to guide you through the EIT funding model. I will explain shortly some of the main principles, underlying principles, such as good governance and financial sustainability. And finally, I will cover the topic of contractual relations and grant cycle. The EIT funding model is a smart model aligning investments towards innovation by leveraging and pooling resources to achieve impact on the short, medium, and long term. How this is done exactly is that the EIT funding during the life cycle of an innovation community cannot exceed 25%. The EIT activities are composed of added value activities, and these added value activities are supported by the EIT in the form of a grant for action. Added value activities are the ones which are contributing to the integration of the knowledge triangle. We could see quite a lot of good examples on the previous slides, Lilium, Navia, and so on, as well as these can be educational programs. This can be the In Energy Highway was referred to, which is the startup venture support program of one of the innovation communities. These are added value activities, as well as the activities linked to the establishment and running of the innovation community and its innovation hubs. Of course, we incentivize the partners of the community to contribute to the funding of the added value activities with cash co-financing. So this is the first level of leverage. Then another set of activities that we call complementary activities are those which are thematically linked to the knowledge triangle integration. These are activities which are not directly funded by the EIT. These are activities which are carried out by partners of the community and funded by the partners of the community. To give an example, it can be an existing education program, or another example, it can be a development of the prototype, and then later, through an added value activity, the prototype is commercialized. So these activities are part of the budget, are part of the KIC activities, and as I said, on the long term, the EIT funding cannot exceed more than 25% of the sets of added value and complementary activities. Then we have other layers of leverage. Very important is the investments attracted by startups, and you could see the example of the shuttle, Navia, supported by EIT Digital, which was so successful that could go out to the market and attract funding from external sources. It can be private sources, it can be public sources. You will hear more about the synergies with other European funding initiatives and funding programs in the afternoon. And then the fourth layer of leverage, equally important, are about the revenues generated by the innovation communities. It can be in different forms. It can be returns on investments. It can be license fees, royalties, students who are paying a fee for participating in a EIT-supported education program. All these layers of leverage are very important and crucial because they do contribute to the financial sustainability of the innovation communities, which is one of the long-term objectives. It was referred to before by Márton in the morning. This is one of the objectives that on the long run, during the lifetime of an innovation community, the dependence from the EIT funding shall be decreased. And you can see the blue and light green and dark green graphs represent different innovation communities. So the pace can be different, the curve can be steeper. However, what is common, that the pattern will follow a bell shape. There will be, after designation, there will be a sharp increase, then there will be a peak, a plateau, and then a decrease to a predefined minimum. On the horizontal axis, you can see the years, the lifetime of the innovation community. On the vertical axis, you can see the EIT financial contribution. As it was said before, under Horizon 2020, the budget is around 2.3 billion euros, which is devoted mostly to grants. What can I tell that in 2018, the grant awarded to the existing innovation communities is 400 million euros. And now the existing 6 innovation communities are in a different sector of this path. The first ones in energy, climate, and digital are at the peak. Health and raw materials are at this very sharply increasing phase, and food has just started. What is very important is that it's a long-term objective. However, from day one, the strategy shall be set up in a way that it can be achieved, and this is something which will be tracked closely by the EIT and by the governing board. Financial sustainability plans shall be part of the strategy. Another set of principles are linked to good governance. Innovation communities are autonomous to set up their strategies, their operational structures, their governance structure. However, they shall be aligned with a common set of governance principles. The first principle is about balanced partnership. This is about the representation of the knowledge triangle and reflecting the diversity of the partners within the governance model. Then we have a principle about separation of ownership, partnership, and management, and day-to-day operational management. That's why the innovation communities have a legal entity which is incorporated as a legal entity in different forms. It can be an association, it can be associated as Europea. You can find examples in the framework of guidance. And there is an operational management team composed of a chief executive officer, chief finance officer, chief operating officer. Then it's very important to have a high-quality decision-making process composed of high-level decision-makers of the partners as well as independent members. Then a system of checks and balances shall be put in place, in particular by separating the supervisory function from the operations. So there shall be a supervisory body, supervisory board with an independent chairman or chairperson. And then important that the size of the governance structure shall be fit to the purpose to ensure an efficient and effective operation. The members of the governance must act in the best interest of the innovation community independently, and each innovation community shall adopt a code of good conduct, including a conflict of interest policy. So these are common features. These have to be respected, but there are many different ways to achieve these objectives and to lay down a structure which respects these objectives. The relationship between the EIT and the innovation communities are regulated through contracts. The first year after designation, so 2019, will be a startup phase, a startup year with a dedicated startup grant. And one of the deliverables of the startup phase will be to enter into the framework partnership agreement with the EIT. This is one of the 2 main contracts we have with each of the innovation communities. This is regulating the rights and obligations in long term. So this is signed for 7 years, which can be renewed upon the decision of the EIT governing board. Very important that the strategic agenda of the innovation community is part of the long-term framework partnership agreement. And then the other type of agreement is called specific grant agreement. This is the instrument to allocate funding currently on an annual basis. Later it can be multi-annual, but this is the instrument to allocate funding, to allocate grants to the innovation communities. And then, of course, there are internal agreements behind between the innovation community partners and the legal entity, because the legal entity is representing the partnership when these contracts are signed. Important that, as mentioned before, we are part of Horizon 2020, so all these agreements are based on model texts and templates of Horizon 2020. Of course, the specific features of the EIT were embedded in the agreements, like the governance, like the financial sustainability, or the funding model. After a successful startup year, the innovation community will enter into the normal business cycle, but it's important that it already starts actually as part of the startup year, because during the startup year, the innovation community will be tasked to prepare its first business plan, which will be submitted to the EIT. So this is the preparation year, and then the EIT governing board will decide on the funding according to criteria laid down earlier and communicated to the innovation communities. Then after the planning, we move to implementation. So it's about the implementation of the business plans. There's a the specific grant agreement is signed at the beginning of the implementation period. From a cash flow perspective, it's important that there is a quite significant pre-financing paid at this moment. And then during the implementation, the EIT will monitor some of the activities. And then after the implementation, we move to the reporting phase. So the innovation communities will report on the implementation of the business plans. The EIT will check the reports. There is a technical report, there's a financial report, and if approved, final grant amount will be disbursed. And then later there are some audits. It's an integral part of the cycle about the legality and eligibility of regularity of expenditure, which will come quite late for you or for the successful innovation communities. However, to prevent any eventual problems in 2 years, in 3 years, when we come to the audits, it's important to lay down the rules and operations right from the very beginning. So I will stop my presentation here, and I will be happy to answer questions later.
Okay, thank you very much, David. That was an excellent overview. I'm conscious of time, so I'd ask if you can stay with us on the stage, and if we could please have Michal come and give us a bit more of an overview with some further detail before we have some more questions on the stage together, and then we're going to open up to the floor. Okay, so there will be an opportunity for you to come back with something if something wasn't quite clear enough for you. Michal, over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Good afternoon already. I will take a few minutes of your time to tell you a few words about monitoring system, how we monitor activities of the KICs to fulfill our obligations, also to ensure that the communities and the innovation communities go towards achieving the targets, the impact targets. So quick presentation about what we do and how we cooperate with the KICs in this area. Starting from with the principles, there are 3 principles how we framed the monitoring system. So first of all, it's continuous. It's kind of the self-explanatory. But what is quite important out of this pillar is that this means that it provides feedback. It provides feedback to us. It provides feedback to you, identifying areas for improvements, how we can improve our operation as EIT, also indicating you some areas which can be strengthened. Then adaptive. What means that KICs are different monitored depending on the maturity level of the KICs. So it's quite clear that when you start operations, then our focus is more on outputs, while when you are maturing, when you are growing, then there is more focus on impact, on the results. On the other hand, it also concerns us as the EIT, as we are gaining experience, as we are learning. It was already mentioned that the EIT community is a learning community, We can also change the way, improve the way how we operate in the monitoring sphere. And bespoke, each KIC is different. Each KIC operates in a different area. Each KIC has different strategic objectives. Each KIC has different specific strategic objectives. So it has its own monitoring system to be sure that it achieved the impact it promised. Few words about monitoring framework, which is set up and framed by the monitoring strategy, EIT monitoring strategy. There are 3 pillars. One is about monitoring of implementation of the grants agreements. That was already mentioned by Dávid in the previous presentation, that every year we are allocating grants. There is a system which ensures that the grants are executed. From our side, we are looking at activities which are implemented by the innovation communities are delivered. One of the instruments which we use here within our portfolio is a so-called monitoring plan. There are some activities which monitor every year to go on the spot, to meet the key partners, to see the outputs on the site. So it's an area which supports grant implementation activities run by the EIT. Then the second one, which is about strategy and multi-annual assessment. This goes beyond the funding allocation because we look there how KIC operate. So we look usually across this kind of the horizontal view, across the key agendas or key activities, key elements of the KIC model. And we do it in basically two different ways. One, we run so-called thematic reviews. So, for example, last year we looked at the research innovation pillars of the KICs, trying to identify good practices, but also trying to identify areas where we could better contribute as a EIT to help KICs to achieve the objectives. Also, that was kind of the mutual learning for the KICs to learn from each other. But other examples of such reviews, assessments, are review of the assessment of the education pillar, of business creation pillar, of good governance principles, of knowledge triangle integration process. So usually we have 1 or 2 assessment reviews per year. And we have dashboard. We look how the KICs operate over years, how they develop their capacity, and how they go towards achieving the impact, the strategic objectives which are initially set in the proposals, and then how those objectives are, how the capacity of the KIC is up and running to achieve those objectives and to fulfill the impact that you promised at the proposal stage. And then evaluation, which is very much about the results and impacts. And this one key instrument which we use, it's an impact framework, but this is more for the more matured KICs to see how those activities are transposed into the objectives of the EIT, which is employment and growth, but also on the specific impact which is going to be delivered by the KICs in the areas they operate. There are 4 layers of our performance measurement system. One is on the level of the innovation community. So this is how you monitor your activities. This is how you monitor your effectiveness in the context of achieving your objectives, different type of objectives, operational objectives, but also strategic objectives. Then we have cross-KIC innovation community level. Very important for us, also very important for you, because it's very much linked with our grant allocation process. It's super difficult to compare KICs among each other because KICs are different, they operate in different areas, have different challenges, but we have to compare them somehow because we are allocating funding and we are allocating funding on a competitive base. So we have a set of the indicators which are trying to capture the operation of the KICs common area of the KICs in five specific areas. I will come back to this when I present the next slide, because this is exactly where I'm going to say a few words about those areas. Then is EIT level, which is probably not very much relevant for you, but very much relevant for us. These are such indicators which are saying about our performance, like time to grant, how effective you are in distributing the money after receiving your proposals, one of the examples. And then the highest level, which is Horizon 2020 level, so how the community as a whole contributes to the objectives of the Horizon 2020. I mentioned about the cross-innovation community KPIs. So in this context, there are 5 areas which capture the key agendas, key elements of the key model: education, innovation, business acceleration, business creation, and dissemination and indicators which are referring to the operation of the KICs. They were designed in a logic to have a kind of the value chain of the activities and the indicators coming up from these activities, so focusing on the outputs and results and the impacts. More information about methodology, about how what is behind these indicators you may find in the documents in the call package, which is published on our website with all definitions. It's also important that, as you probably noticed in the application form, there is a table where we ask you to provide your estimations regarding those KPIs, those key performance indicators, also specific indicators, which will be at the later stage assessed by us when we will evaluate proposals and the external experts, and later on it will be kind of the benchmark for us when we assess the performance of the KICs at the later stage when you will be already designated as an innovation community. Thank you very much.
Okay. Dávid, thank you. Michal, thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers. That was quite a lot of intensive information, but to reassure you, all of this information is available on the website, so you can find this information, okay? I'd just quite like to take a quick point of clarity from each of you before we go out to the audience, if I may, because we're really keen to get some comments and perhaps some questions from your side before we move on to the next session. So let's keep this really quite rapid because I'm quite conscious of time. Márton, kind of double question, but I think it just merits a very rapid response. The deadline for applications, you've already intimated what that is. Is there any flexibility with that deadline? And why restrict the number of partners to 50?
Well, there's no flexibility on the deadline. 5 o'clock, okay. Brussels time, 12th of July. You can submit before, but okay. that's the only flexibility we can offer. Okay. It will be only checked afterward. Now, the second bit is the number of partners. This comes from experience. I mean, as you see, we have already set up a number of innovation communities. Every time we have run this process, we have slightly revised certain aspects. And now we see that this is a number which already shows a balanced and diverse and good partnership, but also keeps the partnership at a manageable level. Because the first year is in particular crucial. It's difficult to manage, bring together a committed partnership who then moves from the proposal stage through the startup phase to becoming a real innovation community. Excellent, that's great, thank you. Dávid, very briefly, what money is available after an EIT Innovation Community is selected and before it's sustainable?
Well, this is a good question, difficult question, because I don't have my crystal ball with me. Okay. What can I tell? That for the first year, a devoted startup grant in the value of 4 million euros, maximum 4 million euros for the startup year. My colleague Manuel will speak about it later a bit more. Okay. And then during the life cycle of the innovation community, well, we have a budget of 2.3 billion for 7 years, from 14 to 20. More than 95% is devoted to grants. we will see the budget under the next framework program. But I think the concept is proven, the model is proven. We have communities up and running, so we are very, very positive on that.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. And Michal, quick question. For the reporting, I think, the key message, if you could just confirm, there are common reporting measures and there are specific reporting areas to each of the EIT communities. Is there an overall framework to support how that's brought together?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we are looking from two perspectives. First of all, I mean, we have to compare the KPIs, what I mentioned. So we have this cross-community key performance indicators, but also we measure the performance of the KPIs, specific performance of the KPI. And we have specific instruments which are trying to capture all the information which are gathering how the communities perform and how they are achieving the specific objectives, which are different for each KPI because they, of course, have different challenges. They operate in different areas, which are captured in our instrument, which is called dashboard. This is multi-annual assessment. And we are comparing the KPIs per wave because, of course, it's quite difficult. This is also quite important to mention that you cannot compare the community which just started with the community which is already on a 7th or 8th year of its operation. So, of course, there are some common features, but we have to also be adaptive and we have to see the communities from the different perspectives, including its maturity and its specific strategic focus.
Okay, so common and tailored.
Yeah, yes.
Moving both together. Excellent. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is an excellent opportunity now to take a few brief questions. We will have some other sessions where we can have some questions from the audience, but this is an opportunity now to perhaps seek out points of clarity. Could I ask if you have a question? We'll have some roaming mics. Very, very briefly, I'm looking for your name, your organisation, a brief question. Yeah, I don't want an introductory statement from you because we don't have time for that. And when you get the mic, could you also please stand up because we need this for the camera, for the recording. So can I have a show of hands, please? Sorry, just so I can check where we have. We have one. I'm going to take 4, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? I'll take these in this order over here. Thank you.
So thank you. My name is Frank Gauterin. I'm from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. So my question is how detailed the planning of the business plan has to be. So is it necessary that every activity of a KIC needs to be planned explicitly in the business plan for the next year and to be negotiated with the EIT?
Thank you. Thank you for keeping that very brief. Can we have a quick response, actually? Yeah.
Okay. So just to clarify, the first business plan for these particular innovation communities will have to be developed through 2019, at the end of the startup year. So it's not something for the proposal stage, right? But then when we speak about the individual business plans, indeed, every single activity is set out in details. The most important aspects are, of course, a clear and concise work plan, associated deliverables, key performance indicators, maybe EIT or the innovation community related ones, but also the budgeting and the cost items down there. And then at the end, as Dávid has presented the grant cycle, a year after, the innovation communities are reporting against the business plans approved.
And if I may add one sentence, it's very important to emphasize.
One sentence.
It's very important to emphasize how the specific business plan is linked to the multi-annual strategy of the innovation community.
Thank you. That's helpful clarification. There was another, from over here. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jürgen Sjöberg from Chalmers University of Technology. Having followed the development of the EIT over the years, I'm curious to know whether you are anticipating any particular changes in terms of eligibility of a proposal compared to previous rounds, both in terms of absolutely musts that have to be in, which didn't have to be there last time around? And if there are anything, and particularly when it comes to the assessment, that you have been changing from last periods?
Okay, so question here about the kind of the flexibility versus some sort of rigidity or clarity in the process. Whoever.
Indeed, I mean, as I've mentioned, every time we run a proposal, we revise, slight things are changed. So if you look through, one of the aspects, as I've mentioned during my presentation, was we have revised the weighting of the evaluation criteria to give more emphasis on the strategic aspects and to give more emphasis on the actual impact bits of it. We have also slimmed down the operational requirements. So for example, concerning the interim management team, we'll no longer require an interim chief financial officer to be in place. That's also a difference. And there are other aspects. I mean, as you've heard, we are continuously evolving, and certain bits over time become more and more prominent. One example is the regional innovation scheme, which is now more and more moving from a simple outreach activity to a strategically important aspect. We are also changing and revising continuously our monitoring strategy. As Michal has mentioned, we are also working more and more on activities which reach out across the innovation communities. So these aspects become more and more important. There are slight technical changes in the way we evaluate, for example, the 70% threshold, but no groundbreaking differences compared to previous call for proposals.
Okay, thank you, Márton. Yep.
If I might also add that you can find in the call package two documents which are quite important and of course so give you kind of the also better insights in what you asked. One is the proposal itself, where it was somehow written in a way that is also guiding what we expect from the applicants. And the second document, which was put into the call package, is the evaluators forms. So this is how the evaluator is going to assess the proposals. So I think that this can be kind of the interesting insight for all applicants to take a look at.
Good. Okay, thank you. We had a question. It was in the middle over here. It's this gentleman here. Do we have a mic for this gentleman, please? Sorry? No, there's someone behind you.
Hello. Philippe Wouters, Clean Air Lovers Belgium. I'm sure there will be different, very valuable innovation communities. The first takes all means there will be a lot of experience and possibilities that will not happen. Why is this, and how can this maybe be mitigated?
Okay.
If I understood the question correctly, this refers to the fact that only the first partnership is being selected. And of course, the answer is, which I'll try to highlight, that the partnerships, they remain open. So of course, during the proposal stage, you have to set out the strategic objectives, clearly define the team you would like to focus on within, but the partnerships have to define a clear path for keeping the partnership and the innovation community for the later years open. There are, I mean, if you look at the number of partners, now we have 1,200 partners across the innovation communities. So most of them have grown above 100 partners in most partnerships. So the 50 is not a closed club, it's just starting up. As I've mentioned, this is already a challenge to keep this partnership committed and manageable at the startup stage. But later on, as all other innovation communities, the club is open. If you look at the practice of how innovation communities do that, there are different ways. Some involve partners already to come up with ideas on what kind of added value activities they can work on. Others look the partnership more from a strategic perspective, voting together with their partners on allowing new members to join, and then letting these members internally to compete year by year for the funding allocation.
Thank you very much, Márton. We had one question over here. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Rosario Macario from Lisbon University. The question is, if I understood well, the starting grant is for the first year and it is out of the 400 million. So it is a different amount and does not sum up or is not included in the 400 million. So, and this corresponds to the 25% funding. And there is a matching of 75%. The question is, how do we calculate the 75%? What counts for the 75%? And I give an example related with urban mobility, which is my area. Imagine, and you don't need to imagine, this reality, a global operator that is a core member of a KIC that has operations in several countries, inside and outside Europe. What counts from that operator for the 75%? Because all his activity is related with mobility.
Thank you.
Okay, so a quick clarification first on the funding model and then on the startup grant. About the funding model, as it was mentioned, the cornerstone of the funding model is that the EIT funding cannot exceed 25% over the lifetime of the KIC. I would like to emphasize that this is not an annual requirement, that this is over the whole life cycle of an innovation community. And the two set of activities, added value activities, which are financed by the EIT, and complementary activities. It's very difficult to give an exhaustive list of complementary activities, but there must be a thematic link, and these activities shall be implemented by the partners of the community. And they are financed from these partners. So the financing is not contributed directly to the budget of the innovation community. However, if these are activities where there's a thematic link, they are funded by the partners. This is counted in the 75%. On the startup grant, maybe there was a slight misunderstanding there. There is a first year, a very special year, again based on our experience, that there is 1 year to achieve legal readiness, operational readiness, build up brand identity, prepare the first business plan. This is the startup year with a dedicated startup grant up to 4 million euros. And then when an innovation community enters into the normal grant cycle, then there are annual funding allocations. The 400 million I referred to, it was just an example. This is the grant, total grant allocated to the 6 communities in 2018. Unfortunately, since we don't know yet the budget of FP9, and this is very premature to discuss that, it's impossible to tell what will be the total budget of an innovation community. However, you can see some, if you go on our website, you can see some statistics on the funding, and you can see how this has evolved for the current innovation communities.
That's a very helpful clarification, David. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to join me in thanking our 3 team members from the EIT for some very insightful and rather intensive information this morning. Thank you very much, Márton, Dávid and Michal. Thank you very much.